All right, so today we're going deep, really deep into a company most people probably haven't even heard of.
Definitely flies under the radar.
Yeah, but we're talking about BlackRock,
Mm-hmm.
and I think as we get into it, everyone's going to realize, wow, this is a company that likely impacts our lives every day.
Absolutely.
So we're breaking down this YouTube video. It's from More Perfect Union,
Okay.
and it's called BlackRock, The Conspiracies You Don't Know.
Ooh, intriguing.
Yeah.
A little ominous.
It is. As we get into this, you'll see why that title is actually pretty fitting.
Yeah.
So to start off, for those who aren't familiar, what is BlackRock?
Well, BlackRock is an asset manager. And in fact, they are the world's largest asset manager.
Okay.
They manage, get this, $10.6 trillion.
$10.6 trillion.
Yeah, that's more than half of the entire U.S. GDP, just to put that into perspective.
Right.
So essentially what they do is they invest money on behalf of their clients, which include pension funds, insurance companies.
Yeah.
And yeah, even your 401k probably has some connection to BlackRock.
So it's like they're managing, it sounds like they're managing money for like the institutions that manage money for us.
Exactly. There's kind of this layered effect going on.
Yeah.
So you might not interact with them directly,
Right.
but your money's definitely flowing through their hands at some point.
Wow. So with all that money, all that responsibility, what are they investing in? Like, what's their main focus?
Well, one of their big things is index funds.
Okay.
Have you ever, thought about betting on a horse race?
Sure.
Well, imagine instead of picking one winning horse, you bet on all the horses.
Okay.
That's kind of the basic idea behind index funds.
Okay.
They track a specific market index, like the S&P 500, and they try to match its performance by holding a little bit of everything in that index.
So less risk.
Right. It's a more diversified approach.
Yeah.
Lower risk, consistent returns.
Okay, so is that what people mean when they say BlackRock is a passive investor?
Right, but, and this is where things get a little more interesting.
Yeah.
With that much money, $10.6 trillion,
Yeah.
they own a portion of almost every company in those indexes.
Really?
Yeah, the stake in any one company might seem small, maybe like 3% to 10%,
Uh-huh.
but that often makes them the single largest shareholder.
Interesting.
And that creates this inherent contradiction.
Yeah.
Because how can you be a passive investor when you're the biggest player in the game?
Right, because like if they decide to do anything, it's going to affect everybody else.
Exactly. If they tried to sell off a large chunk of their holdings, well, it could crash the market.
Oh, wow.
So it's almost like they're steering the market by simply existing.
It's like a giant trying to walk through a tiny room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Every step they take has a huge impact.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads us to this concept of universal ownership.
Yes.
That the video highlights. So what does that mean? And what does that actually look like on a day-to-day level? Like, how does that affect us?
So universal ownership essentially means that BlackRock has a piece of almost every major company out there. Right? And because of that, their influence stretches across so many different industries.
Okay.
Think about it. If they're a major shareholder in both Coke and Pepsi,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily want to see one company just crush the other through like super low prices.
Right, they win either way.
Exactly. And that lack of true competition could mean that you end up paying more for that can of soda at the grocery store.
Wow, so even small ownership stakes can have a big impact.
Absolutely. And the video uses a great example from the athletic wear industry because BlackRock owns significant shares in companies like Nike, Adidas, Under Armour.
Right, all the big ones.
Yeah, and it potentially creates less incentive for those companies to like really compete on price, which could mean that you end up shelling out more for those running shoes.
It's like this like hidden hand pushing prices up. And most consumers probably don't even know what's happening.
Right, they're just looking at the price tag, not the shareholder structure behind it.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there, right?
No, not at all.
This ownership also gives them a lot of power when it comes to company decision making.
Oh, absolutely.
So how does that work?
Well, stock ownership equals voting power in a company.
Okay.
And BlackRock, with their massive holdings,
Yeah.
well, they have an enormous number of votes. It's almost like a pyramid scheme,
Right.
You contribute to your pension fund, that pension fund invests with BlackRock,
Wow.
and suddenly BlackRock is wielding your voting rights on a massive scale.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. But it's true. It's like my vote, but it's not really my vote.
Right. It gets a little murky.
Yeah, it does make you wonder whose interests are really being served in this whole system.
That's a key question. And the video actually cites a study that found that BlackRock overwhelmingly votes in favor of what company executives want.
Really?
So, yeah, it raises concerns about whether those votes are truly reflecting the desires of the individual investors who contribute to those funds in the first place.
So it's kind of like this feedback loop where BlackRock is supporting the executives who are then making decisions that benefit BlackRock.
It can definitely feel that way.
Okay, so we've talked about BlackRock's size, their influence through ownership, their voting power, and this is just the beginning.
We're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. What else should we consider as we go deeper into this?
Well, next we need to look at how BlackRock's influence might be affecting something that hits everyone's wallets.
Hitting our wallets. Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, we're talking wages, specifically the potential role BlackRock plays in wage stagnation.
Okay, that's... I'm a little confused now.
Yeah.
How could they be contributing to stagnant wages if they're just, trying to grow their clients' money?
It's all about the incentives in our current financial system.
Right.
Companies often see increasing profits as the ultimate goal, right?
Right, yeah.
And a common way to do that is by keeping labor costs low.
Okay.
And guess who benefits from those increased profits? Shareholders, including BlackRock.
Ah, okay. So by prioritizing shareholder returns, BlackRock is kind of indirectly contributing to a system that's keeping wages down.
That's one way to look at it.
This is getting kind of unsettling. Like,
Yeah.
we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet. This is affecting people's lives.
Yeah, exactly. This is about real people's ability to make ends meet, to afford the things they need.
Right, right. And it's all kind of happening in this, like, behind-the-scenes way that most people aren't even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to feel a little bit like a conspiracy theory, actually.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. It's not something that's widely discussed,
Right.
but the implications are definitely there.
Okay, so we can't talk about BlackRock without talking about their relationship with the government.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
So what's the deal with this whole revolving door between BlackRock and government positions?
There's definitely a pattern there that's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
You see BlackRock employees moving into government positions,
Okay.
and then government officials going to work for BlackRock.
Uh-huh.
There are tons of examples. People from the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve,
Wow.
even international organizations like the IMF.
So it's more than just a few isolated cases then.
Oh, yeah. It's a trend that's been going on for a while.
So is this just a matter of people with experience moving between sectors? Or is there something more to it? Like, is there undue influence happening?
That's the big question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's not just about the employees moving back and forth either.
Okay.
The video also points to Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO, as a major player in the political sphere.
So it's not just coincidence that BlackRock has so much influence in both the public and private sectors.
It certainly makes you wonder about potential conflicts of interest,
Right, right.
and how that might be affecting policy decisions.
That brings to mind the 2008 financial crisis, actually. Wasn't BlackRock involved in advising the government on the bailout back then?
They were, and that's a pretty significant detail to consider, especially when we're talking about their level of influence.
Yeah, because it's kind of like they benefit from the crisis, then they advise on the solution.
Right.
And it kind of seems like they were in a position to benefit from the solution as well.
It definitely raises questions about whether their interests were aligned with those of, the average person who was struggling during that time.
It feels like a classic too big to fail situation, and we've seen how well that usually turns out.
Right. It's a valid concern.
Okay, so we've got this revolving door situation.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also this whole thing about how BlackRock manages to stay classified as a passive investor.
Yeah, that's another interesting piece of the puzzle.
Because, I mean, from what you've described, it doesn't seem very passive.
No, not really. But the current system essentially relies on BlackRock self-certifying their passivity.
Self-certifying, so like they just tell the government they're being good.
Pretty much, they send an annual letter to regulators.
A letter.
Yeah, claiming that they're operating within the boundaries of what defines a passive investor.
Seriously, they just send a letter and that's it. No audits, no in-depth investigations.
It's a pretty big loophole, and some agencies are starting to push for change.
Okay, like who?
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB,
All right.
and the FDIC.
Okay.
They've been advocating for stricter oversight of asset managers like BlackRock, especially those that hold significant stakes in banks.
Makes sense, but I'm guessing BlackRock isn't too happy about that idea.
Well, they're definitely lobbying against increased regulation.
Of course.
I mean, they have a lot to lose if the rules of the game change, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay, this is more tangled than I expected.
And it gets even more complex when you look at who BlackRock's biggest investors are.
Oh, okay, I'm ready for this. Who's bankrolling the world's largest asset manager? Spill the beans.
Well, you might be surprised to hear that it's actually other massive asset management firms.
Okay, like who?
The big names are Vanguard and State Street.
So, wait, like, the companies that manage our money, their money is being managed by BlackRock.
Exactly. It's all very interconnected.
Wow.
And guess who Vanguard and State Street's biggest investors are?
Let me guess. BlackRock and each other.
Bingo.
It's like a financial Ouroboros, right? Like a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
The whole financial sector is basically just owning itself at this point.
It creates a very interesting dynamic.
Interesting. I don't know. It seems a little scary to me.
Well, that's what we're going to unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
We've only just begun to explore the implications of this kind of concentrated financial power and what it means for, everyday people like you.
All right, so stay tuned, everybody.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive into BlackRock.
So last time we ended on this crazy idea that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are all major investors in each other.
Yeah, it's like this financial knot almost.
Yeah, like they're all tangled up together.
And it's, when you start thinking about stability, accountability, all that stuff, it gets a little
Scary.
Yeah.
The video uses this phrase, shareholder oligarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, that sounds kind of ominous.
It is. It really captures the essence of the problem.
But what does that actually mean, though? Like, what is a shareholder oligarchy?
Well, it suggests that a small group of shareholders, and we're talking powerful ones like BlackRock, have too much control over what companies do.
Okay.
And their interests might not always line up with, the average worker or the overall economy.
Right. It's like their goals and our goals are totally different.
It creates a power imbalance.
And one thing that stuck with me from the video is they said BlackRock didn't necessarily invent this system.
Right.
But they figured out how to exploit it, like better than anyone else.
Well, they found the cheat codes.
Yeah. Again,
They've mastered the game.
But the problem is, not everyone benefits from those cheat codes, right?
Exactly. Some people are definitely winning more than others.
Yeah, the video pointed out that, like, the bottom 50% of Americans own barely any stock at all.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really reaping the rewards of this system.
And that raises some serious questions about fairness and, inequality.
Yeah, because if a small group of investors are calling all the shots, it's easy for the needs of everyday people to get overlooked.
They don't have a seat at the table.
So, I mean, what's the solution here? This feels like a huge systemic problem.
Yeah, it's not an easy fix.
How do we even begin to make things more balanced and, create a system that actually works for everyone?
There are no easy answers, unfortunately, but the video does offer some potential solutions.
Okay, like what?
One idea is regulating asset managers like we regulate banks.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that seems to make sense, right? If they're wielding this much financial power.
It's been a hot topic for a while.
Yeah.
Some people argue that stronger regulations would create more transparency and help prevent these huge meltdowns like what happened in 2008.
Right, but we saw how much BlackRock is fighting against any kind of increased regulation.
Yeah, they have a lot to lose if the rules change.
It's tough, because it's their job to make money for their clients, right?
Right, but their interests aren't always aligned with, the public good.
It's this constant tension between profit and people.
Exactly.
So, okay, one idea is more regulation. What else? The video also mentioned something about reviving shareholder democracy.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating concept.
Remind me what that is.
Basically, it's the idea of giving individual investors more say in how companies are run.
Okay, like a throwback to the old days.
Kind of, when your vote actually mattered.
Yeah, instead of just being one tiny drop in BlackRock's ocean of votes.
Right, because right now, most individual investors feel like they don't have a real voice.
It's like they're voiceless.
So the idea is if we empower individual investors, companies will have to be more accountable to, a broader range of people.
It's a nice idea, but how do we actually make that happen?
That's the challenge. It would require a pretty radical shift in, how we think about stock ownership and corporate governance.
Yeah, I mean, we're so used to this system where The big institutions call all the shots.
It's ingrained in our financial DNA.
It would be a huge change.
But imagine if workers actually had a say in how their companies operate.
Right, like decisions about wages,
Yeah.
working conditions,
Mm.
even how profits are distributed.
It could lead to a much more equitable system.
It's a nice thought.
It is, but the question is, how do we get from here to there?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest obstacles is just how detached most people are from the financial system.
It's true. It's this complex, opaque world.
It's like this giant machine that we don't understand, and we just see the end results.
And those end results can feel pretty random and unpredictable.
Yeah, like, why are prices going up? Why are my wages staying the same? It's frustrating.
It's like being on a roller coaster, but you have no control over the ride.
Yeah, you're just strapped in, holding on for dear life.
And you don't know where you're going.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important to, try to understand this stuff, even if it's complicated.
Knowledge is power.
Yeah, the more we learn,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped we'll be to, make informed decisions and actually advocate for change.
It's about taking control.
Okay, so big picture. What's the main takeaway about BlackRock?
I think the key takeaway is that this concentration of power, in the hands of these huge companies, it has consequences for everyone,
Yeah.
whether you realize it or not.
Like that butterfly effect thing, right?
Yeah.
Like one decision made by BlackRock could ripple out and affect your job, your investments, even just like the prices you pay for stuff at the store.
Absolutely. Their actions have a far-reaching impact.
So what can we do about it?
Well, like we talked about, there are some efforts to regulate them more strictly.
Right.
There are groups pushing for transparency and accountability,
Okay.
but BlackRock is pushing back.
Of course.
So it's an ongoing battle.
It feels like a long shot, but hopefully things will change.
Well, remember, the financial system is a human invention, right? It's not set in stone.
Okay.
We have the power to reshape it to make it work better for everyone.
All right. I like that. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, there's hope, but we have to stay informed and engaged.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to take a break.
We'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into BlackRock.
Okay. So we're back. And I'm still kind of processing everything we've talked about with BlackRock. It's a lot.
It can be overwhelming to think about, how much power they have.
Yeah. We talked about their influence, the connections to the government, the impact on wages, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel kind of helpless, like we're just little ants in this giant financial system.
I get it, but I don't think we should give in to that feeling. Remember, we have more power than we realize.
Okay, so where do we go from here? We've explored the problems, but now what? What can we actually do about it?
Well, first of all, you're already doing something by listening to this deep dive, right? You're learning, you're becoming more aware.
So awareness is the first step.
Exactly, because once you understand how the system works, you can start to think about how to change it.
Okay, so what comes after awareness? The video talked about regulating these giant asset managers like banks. Is that actually happening?
There are definitely people pushing for it, organizations that are fighting for more transparency and accountability.
Are they making any progress?
It's a slow process, but yeah, there have been some positive developments. Of course, BlackRock and the other big firms are pushing back hard.
Yeah, I bet they are. It seems like an uphill battle, but hopefully it's a battle worth fighting.
It is, and there are things we can do to support those efforts.
Okay, like what?
Well, for starters, keep learning. The more you understand about finance, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Makes sense. So any recommendations for resources where people can learn more?
Yeah, there are tons of great books, articles, podcasts out there. Just do a search for things like financial reform or shareholder activism. You'll find a lot of information.
Awesome. So educate ourselves. What else?
Another thing you can do is support organizations that are working on these issues.
Oh, like donating to them.
Exactly. A lot of these groups rely on donations to keep going.
I can definitely get behind that.
And you can also make your voice heard by contacting your elected officials.
Like call them up and complain.
Well, you can do that, but also just let them know that you care about these issues. Tell them you want to see change.
Right. Make some noise. Get their attention.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of individual action.
Okay, this is all good stuff. What about our own investments? Is there anything we can do there to, be more responsible or ethical?
Absolutely. You can choose to invest in companies that align with your values.
Like what kind of companies?
Well, there are funds that focus on things like social responsibility or environmental sustainability. You can also choose to avoid investing in companies that you feel are doing harm.
So we can use our money to support the good guys and like boycott the bad guys.
It's all about making conscious choices with your investments.
I like that. It's empowering.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I'm not just stuck in this system, that I can actually do something to change it.
That's exactly the point. We all have a role to play in creating a more just and sustainable financial system.
So what's the final thought we want to leave our listeners with? What's the big question they should be asking themselves?
Well, I think the most important question is this. What kind of world do we want to live in? And what kind of financial system will help us create that world?
That's a big one, but it's something we all need to think about. We have the power to shape the future, and it starts with asking the right questions.
And taking action. Don't forget that part.
All right, well, this has been an eye-opening deep dive, to say the least. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and keep those questions coming.
Until next time.